And these are guys that fans now know about, the Jett Williams, the Brandon Sproats, Ryan Clifford, you mentioned Drew Gilbert. Who are some guys right now that maybe fans aren't talking about enough?
I think you're like the next tier that's kind of sitting in minor league camp that's not quite in major league camp right now. Watched a great Nolan McLean live yesterday. I know he's high up on our prospect list, but he's a guy who didn't crack major league camp this year. Jack Williams, I watched his body like completely change this offseason. He's got a lot of potential inside of him. He's not somebody that's on the lips of every fan right now. And Nick Morbito was our player of the year. The guy just plays baseball, and he did a really nice job last year. He's got a lot of growth opportunities ahead of him, which every single guy in the minor leagues does. But he's the kind of guy that I'll bet on that wiring and that person to chase down what's out in front of him. And so I think we'll get some exposure to him in some big league camp games as well, which will be fun for some fans to see.
Welcome to Meet at the Apple. I'm Vito Calisi. That's Jonathan Barron. And today we are joined by Andy Green, the SVP of Player Dev here at the New York Mets. This is, I feel like, a really busy time for anybody in Player Dev because you have literally your entire system is raining down on Port St. Lucie. Things are really heating up. What's an average day like for you at spring training?
Long but good. We got a lot of things going on in both places. You got the Major League side where you have a lot of prospects getting their first taste of Major League camp. You think of Ryan Clifford over there for the first time. You got Jett Williams and Drew Gilbert going back for kind of a second time. So that's going on in the morning, and then we have our full run in the afternoon session. So there's presentations, there's planning, there's coach education. We have a lot of new faces in. So the day goes long. It's fun though, man. You're around elite players, you're around guys who have big dreams, and you're helping propel them towards those dreams. Like, I can't imagine what else would be more enjoyable.
This is fun for us. I mean, Vito didn't mention it at the top, but this is, you've been our white whale for a little bit here. We've been wanting to talk to you for a really long time. You've got a very unique perspective as a guy who both played in the major leagues, you've managed in the major leagues, and now you're in a totally different role overseeing the Mets player development system. And for fans who might not be that familiar with how things work between yourself and David and others, can you sort of give an explanation of the top of the structure of the organization?
Yeah, obviously David sits at the top of baseball operations. He oversees every bit of it. On the player development side, I report directly to him, in charge of kind of our whole PD apparatus. Inherited a bunch of really good people, Andrew Christie, Max Vogel-Freeman, that know a lot about how things have functioned here for a while. And then all the coaches are reporting up through our structure that way. So everybody from a coordinator to a VP of pitching and Eric Jagers, they're all a part of our player development apparatus. So that's the structure within the PD space.
You know, I just want to give a shout out to Andrew Christie because when me and John first started doing any sort of podcast for the Mets, it was our minor league show, Future of Flushing. And that podcast started here 2 years ago where Andrew Christie brought us to the middle by the tower and was just bringing guys over every 5 minutes. And the amount of knowledge that Andrew Christie has about every single player in this organization on just like a moment's notice is absolutely insane. And the relationships he has with these guys, like, it's really impressive. How happy are you to see a guy that is working under you that's able to like have that kind of personality?
Oh, absolute perfect pairing for me in my first year to have such intimate knowledge of each player, understand their background, where they're from, talking family dynamics, what they've overcome to achieve what they've already achieved. Andrew's just really plugged in, and he grinds. He's passionate. He cares about the group. It's probably one too many compliments for Andrew publicly that I'm comfortable with, so might flip topics, but it does not shock me that he gave you all access, and they gave those guys great reps of what they'll ultimately have to face in Queens one day when they have the opportunity to deal with a lot more media than just a couple guys.
Well, a couple of those guys a few years ago have really risen, and they're towards the top of the organization, especially on a lot of the prospect lists that come out. And these are guys that fans now know about, the Jett Williams, the Brandon Sproats, organization has added, Ryan Clifford, you mentioned Drew Gilbert. Who are some guys right now that maybe fans aren't talking about enough that they should know about?
Yeah, I think you're like the next tier that's kind of sitting in minor league camp that's not quite in major league camp right now. Watched a great Nolan McLean live yesterday. I know he's high up on our prospect list, but he's a guy who didn't crack major league camp this year. Jack Williams, I watched his body like completely change this offseason. He's he's got a lot of potential inside of him. He's not somebody that's on the lips of every fan right now. And Nick Morbido was our Player of the Year. The guy just plays baseball, and he did a really nice job last year. He's got a lot of growth opportunities ahead of him, which every single guy in the minor leagues does. But he's the kind of guy that I'll bet on that wiring and that person to chase down what's out in front of him. And so I think we'll get some exposure to him in some big league camp games as well, which will be fun for some fans to see.
How hard is it to kind of like have this competition within baseball, player dev systems, in the sense of like, obviously the major league level, it's 30 teams competing for playoffs, competing for the postseason, but then every other team on the minor league level is competing at a player dev system, trying to find the best structure, trying to find the best personnel, the best system, the best facilities. How is it keeping up with everything, keeping an eye on everything, and just knowing like, okay, we're up to date, we're doing what we want to do?
Yeah, I mean, it's improving your processes and your systems that ultimately impact the players. It's really simple. Make players better. Like, that's the essence of player development. Like, create the environment where your players develop faster and more fully than every other organization in baseball. You can get very internal and look at your processes, reevaluate them. I think ultimately it's, what is the major league standard? What does it look like to play alongside of Juan Soto and Francisco Lindor, and to be in a rotation with Senga, or the bullpen with Diaz? What do those things look like? And how do we close the gap with our players? Usually it's just like giving them truth laced with expectation and hope of like, this is what you're supposed to look like. And if you take care of this, you will become that. And being able to speak in the affirmative in a way that's compelling for guys to want to chase down what's in their heart. But it's also like developing resilience and adaptability in the athlete as well. It's like, this game is hard. It's hard for the guys that are making hundreds of millions of dollars. It's really hard for the young guy trying to establish themselves. Like, what they're going to have from an intestinal fortitude perspective, it's a separator. And we should be putting that inside of them, or creating an awareness where they can take ownership of like, man, it's going to take a lot of resilience. Man, I'm going to have to be open-minded and continue to change and evolve. And as I look at the major league standard from where I am right now, I understand what I have to do. And I think the big part of player development is like, can we create that awareness? Can we create that understanding? Can we transfer that ownership to them? And when they don't take it right away, can we remain patient and figure out a different way to package the message so it eventually like connects with a human? So when you think about players, like, you give information, it's all running through a different computer. Like, we're all different up top. And the differences in the guys means we have to have a diversity in messaging that clicks with different guys. So we have a really skilled development staff, and it's, in my opinion, improved a lot over the last year. There's a lot of great people that are still around. We've been able to like add to that, and that creates like a unity of messaging, but an ability to kind of diversify the mechanism that actually gets it to the player. So at the core, it's simple. Make players better and do it faster and more fully than any other organization.
That's a really good segue to what my next question was going to be. You took the job in October of 2023. You were here spring training last year. This is your second spring training with the Mets. What is your kind of state of the union as to where this farm system stands right now? There's all the lists, there's the prognosticators. The Mets have definitely risen these lists, especially since you've taken over. But what's your 10,000-foot view on where things currently stand?
Yeah, I think there's always a push to get better. And the simplicity of it is, no matter where you find yourself on the rankings, our job remains the same. You all get to talk about where we stand or where our prospects stand. Fans get to get excited about that. Ultimately, it's like, I don't care if you're a top 300 prospect and trying to move to the top 200, or top 200 trying to move to the top 100, top 100 try to crack the big leagues. Like, our job is really simple, not to get overwhelmed at the things that the world says on the outside, to be fully consumed with giving the message to the player that moves them up those rankings. And if you do that and you stack good decision on top of good decision, like, you look up and it's like, people are talking about our farm system. It's just not any place that I spend much time. But I think where we do spend time is like, all right, if this particular player shows up in the big leagues, this is the hole that is going to get exploited. How do we close that hole while maximizing their strengths that already exist? Because you can over-fixate on a weakness for a player, and sometimes that leads down bad paths as well. So like, it's just connecting with each individual, and I don't spend a ton of time thinking about where are we ranked or where our players are ranked. It's just, how do we get these guys better?
Now, part of the game is developing these guys and having them help the New York Mets, but when it comes to prospects and equity in the system, sometimes it's in the form of moving guys to acquire players to the major league level. And I'm curious to know what that process is like, especially towards maybe the trade deadline, where a team that's competing is looking to add and bolster itself for a postseason run. And maybe you've got a guy who you feel really strongly about, and you maybe say, hey, I don't know about trading this guy. What is that give and take like, especially with people that are more focused on the major league side of things?
I do think that's where my life experience helps me. Like, spend a decade in the big leagues, you know what it's all about. You know it's about what happens in Queens, and you know there's pain in every trade you have to make. And the fact that you trade somebody doesn't mean you didn't love them or think highly of their future. So my perspective is like, what does Mendy need? What does David need that keeps us winning baseball games and doing it year after year? And then we create enough of a surplus in that space that we have sustained success for the long haul. Great organizations create space for their elite prospects to impact their major league club. Look at third base last year. Look behind the dish for us. Look at Acuna coming up late in the year in like pivotal moments. Like David is like sees that like we have to have those guys in order to have sustained success. And at the same time, there is a grouping of guys that will be hard to part with when this team at the big league level is chasing down what we hope they're chasing down this year. And I hope we got nothing but hard decisions. I hope I have to tell David how much I love guys and please don't trade this guy. And then I hope he understands my vantage point in that moment and makes the decision that's best for the collective group. And he's really good at that. Nate Horowitz, our pro scouting department, those guys do a really, really nice job. So I think that is a give and take that will always exist in good organizations. I've managed a rebuild where all you did was trade off your big league teams to get prospects.
Padres, right?
Did that in the Padres.
Trying to think. Upton, was he part of that?
Upton got traded away. Kemp got traded away. Shields got traded away. Cashner, Kimbrel, Pomeranz, like a bunch of all-stars. You don't like it is a necessary step to set the stage for certain organizations. We're not there. So I certainly hope we're not adding to our prospect value this upcoming year. I hope we're adding to our major league team because that's what it's all about. And I also know at the same time it's completely necessary for us to find spaces for our elite ones to step on the field in Queens and for people to be excited about that and not just, man, we should have gone and gotten the free agent. Because if you look up what we got from Mark Vientos is not easy to find on the market. And it's not easy to find what Francisco Alvarez is doing on the market. So creating space for those guys to do it internally, like, sustains your success long term.
What do those wins feel like for you guys where a guy like Vientos goes up to the big leagues the first time, struggles, goes back down to AAA, goes up, has this amazing year he had in 24. And then on the other side, a guy like Luis Angel Acuna, who might have struggled at AAA, but when he was called up to that major moment, literally helped carry this team to the playoffs in the final week or two of the season.
Yeah, sing Mark's praises first. Like, was not happy about going down. He handled that adversity and that disappointment as professionally as possible. There was some anger driving his work in AAA, and that's okay because he was channeling it towards productivity. Like, you can't look at somebody and say, you shouldn't be angry about this. It's like, no, you should. You fought your life to get to the spot where you could be on a big league lineup, and then it didn't happen for you. So nobody's frustrated with the anger. He channeled it productively. He was working incredibly hard in AAA. I watched him out there grinding on ground balls when I went. There wasn't a smile on his face at that moment in time. He wanted something more. And like the adversity these guys get, if they handle it right, they stand on it to launch themselves to the next level of greatness. If they handle it poorly, it beats them down. And so, like in Mark's case, like I thought it was like as good of a situation as you could possibly have. You don't artificially create those circumstances, but when they arise, like he handled that beautifully. In Acuna's situation, a crazy high floor because of the way he defends the field and runs the bases and puts the ball in play. Like, you're talking about a guy that stick him at shortstop in a pennant chase or in a playoff chase, and it was elite. And that's like our minor league staff. Adrian Texador worked with him in AAA. Dick Scott worked with him in AAA. Should take a lot of pride in the fact that this guy came up and played with a slow clock and a good rhythm and made huge plays. Where the extra bat speed came from and the homers came from, that was a fun ride, and we hope he taps into it for the future. But we love who he is with a glove on his hands, on the bases, and putting the ball in play. That's just a really valuable guy to have in the organization.
So it's interesting you say that. I've always felt like in this setting with young players and filling the major league roster with them, it's sometimes better to light that fire under a guy's tuchlis, we'll say that to keep the show PG, and make a guy work towards something instead of giving someone a job in spring training. Because if there's no safety net under there and the player fails for the first time, then where do you go? Do you agree that making a guy earn it and hitting his way into the lineup or into the major leagues and staying there is sometimes the best way of getting the most out of young players, as opposed to breaking camp with a young player and saying, hey, we need you. If it's not you, we don't have another option here, and putting all the pressure on the player, and then sometimes that doesn't work out?
Yeah, I think as you go through life, you see both ways succeed, and you tend to not artificially create a circumstance around a player. You just like, these are our circumstances. How do we make them serve our purposes? So in Mark's case, like the addition of JD Martinez was huge for the team. And we're thinking about the collective good of the team. And I think that message to the guys that are on the major league team is powerful. I think that message to the guys in the minor leagues. I think for us in development, I can look people in the face and honestly say, like, there is a standard to play for the New York Mets now. And they see it by the guys that suit up in uniform and what they've accomplished. And that, like, causes them to fight harder and to rise up more. So I think of, like, I had Tatis as a rookie in San Diego. Like, we didn't artificially create any circumstance for him. He was ready to go. So go play in the big leagues. Here's your spot. Go do it. And then you watch the Vientos situation last year, and I think he made that circumstance serve him, and he deserves a ton of credit for taking a negative, standing on it, and launching himself to a great first season. And now it's going to take more resolve and more effort and more energy to continue to sustain the success. And I think the early signs are really, really positive being around him in camp this year.
So let's talk about some of the coaching staff across all three levels, all 5 or 6 levels we actually have with the Dominican League, with PSL, with everything. But how tough is it to be a minor league manager, because you have like a dual role? You're helping these guys grow and you're helping them get better. And the goal is obviously for that player to move on to the next spot, but you're also still trying to win baseball games. How tough is it for a minor league manager to be able to like balance those things? Obviously, they're always going to look for what's best for the player to push them ahead, but having to keep track of, okay, if this guy's going up, I need to pay attention who's below him and be ready to fit that into our club here.
Yeah, development's number one always. Part of development is learning how to win and learning where winning is from an importance standpoint. So you have to teach guys how to win while you're developing them. And then you have to be very honest with them that there's moments in time as a manager, you might make it a little harder on them in the minor leagues. You might know you have a better pinch hit option on the bench, but you don't execute that pinch hit option. You might know that you could have brought somebody else into the fire to help get a pitcher out, but that pitcher needs to go through that. So I think you're just very direct with your team at the outset, having done that specific job at a lot of different levels. You just, hey, might not make it easy on you. Your job is to rise up and win baseball games. That's what you're playing today to do. If you condition that response in them and to control what they can control, the winning does tend to take care of itself at the minor league level, but it is definitely a key part of development is creating an expectation of winning and then teaching guys how to win. And I think it's a fun place to be, because ultimately what you want to do is you want to send the guy on to the next level with no need for you in the future, because he's the only one that goes. So like all your knowledge, all your depth of insight has to get passed to him while he's present with you. And then he goes and knows it's just a part of him at that point in time. Like, I think managing the minor leagues is an absolute blast because of that.
You guys are bringing back the same AAA manager, Dickie Scott, AA manager, Reed Brignac. High A manager Gilbert Gomez, and there's a new manager here in Port St. Lucie, Luis Rivera, who's been in the organization for a long time. We've gotten to know Luis from our time at spring trainings here. Can you talk a little bit about those four gentlemen and what makes them the right guys for those four jobs?
Yeah, I think all of them are outstanding character guys who care about the players and are passionate about the development of their players. Dick's been doing it a crazy long time, and he does it really well. I think at the AAA level, you always want someone who sees the whole field, that understands the needs of the major league club on a granular level on a day-to-day basis, because you're going to always have to have arms ready if something goes sideways. And Dick, really having sat in the farm director seat, having been a big league bench coach, is a really valuable asset to have at that level, and really covers us in a lot of ways because he can see the whole field really, really well. Reed is a passionate infield instructor who really does create a winning vibe and a hard-working vibe in AA. Going into wherever you caught him in a given year, like, I guarantee you'll see guys out there grinding and working hard, and that's really like what you want at that level and any level for that matter. And I think Gilbert has an incredibly high ceiling as a manager and leader. He's been very successful, and the Dominican is a very young manager over there. Cares about the guys, connects with the guys, creates a crazy positive working environment. So I don't think we could be any more excited about him being present for us at that level. And then Luis Rivera has a wealth of experience. He's managing the low A team here in Port St. Lucie. Mindy loves him so much. He's like, hey, can I have the low A manager in Major League Camp, which doesn't really happen very often. That's how good Louis is. Louis works. Louis cares about guys. He connects. And if you think about like what you have at the lower level, you usually have a group of players that might not speak English very well, that need to get like a stronger acculturation experience in the U.S. Louis connects really well with that group of guys and will help launch them on their career to higher level affiliates as well.
So you brought up Carlos wanting him in Major League Camp, and one thing we noticed last year during the postseason was Gilbert Gomez was in the dugout. Me and John were pumped when we saw him on TV because we had just spoken to him in Brooklyn. Incredible manager, gave us such good insight, has such a good relationship with these guys. But when you get the call that, hey, we want to bring Gilbert over to the playoff run because we know he's going to help with this team, what does that mean to you? What does that say about this organization?
Says a lot about a lot of people, but the first person I think about is Mindy. To be that welcoming all year long. Like, it might not have been the focal point for anybody else on the periphery, but you would see our staff present at Citi Field and welcomed and valued and asked questions. And our guys, I've never seen a manager do it that well. I certainly didn't do it as well as he does it. And that, I mean, he really shrinks the size of our organization by creating that type of an environment. And I think it just says, like, we got some really good people here. A lot of those really good people have been here for a while, and a lot of the really good people just got added recently, and really like the mix right now with what we have.
So when we spoke to Dickie Scott last year, when we went to Lehigh Valley to do some interviews with guys, and we spoke to Dickie, he was telling us that he has regular conversations with Carlos and how open Carlos is to suggestions he has and giving him the report from AAA. Is that the average in baseball, or is that a unique situation because you have a guy like Carlos Mendoza who really does take everybody's opinion and hear everybody out?
I think it probably happens to some degree. It's not executed with the genuineness and the sincerity that Carlos executes it with, and it's not as consistently as he executes it. And it's in the welcoming nature of his, like, typically minor league staff in camp goes down on March 3rd, 4th when our camp is starting, and he asks for more people to keep coming over, to keep giving that kind of enriching experience and to kind of shrink the organization. So he does things that other people just do not think to do, and he does it with genuineness and sincerity.
Let's bring it back to you. You mentioned that you were a manager. You managed the Padres for 4 seasons. How did your experience in the dugout help in the role that you're in right now?
I think it just gives perspective. You know, in our development group, we have a lot of people from diverse perspectives. We have analysts that haven't been on the field, that don't know what it's like. We got a bunch of ex-college baseball players floating around. We got some people put some big league uniforms on. It is valuable to have a diverse perspective. And so my vantage point is, like, I know what the end product is supposed to look like from the last decade being in the big leagues with the Cubs as a bench coach and manager, and then an infield coach with the Diamondbacks before that. I know what it looks like having been there firsthand, and I know the professionalism that it takes to be really, really successful. And so all I'm doing is adding to already a really good mix of people and coming at it from a little bit of a different perspective to like, this is what the end product needs to look like. And I appreciate that Andrew Christie understands everything about where the person's coming from. And now we have kind of that mix of we know where they're coming from and we know where we got to get them. And it's a fun place to work because every perspective is valued and sees it just a little bit differently.
And on the topic of your time with the Padres, it's been 6 years. Can we talk about the 2019 NL Rookie of the Month race?
Oh, goodness. Until you said that, that was completely lost on me.
It's a deep cut. If you know, you know.
Yeah, that's way deep. Just I think he is.
He won. I had a feeling. Speaking of a Met uniform, not the first time. You played, I think, 5 games for the Mets in 2009, the first year at Citi Field. I've got a little trivia question for you. We knew you were coming. I had to be prepared. You had 1 hit as a Met. What pitcher did you pick it up against?
Oh, gosh. So if I guessed this right, it's sad since like I didn't have enough. If you can remember all the pitchers you got hits against, you clearly didn't have that great of a playing career. It was the Braves.
It was the Braves.
Was it Boone Logan?
It was Boone Logan.
Yeah, that's the most important thing is it took my career average from 199 to 200. And then just settled right there and am done now. So at least I didn't finish below the Mendoza line there and finished at it. I joked with Tony La Russa, who ran the Diamondbacks organization when I was over there coaching, and said, "Hey, Tony, you're a career 199 hitter. I'm a career 200 hitter. So like I probably will never come close to you in wins, but you will never catch me in batting average."
Unless you did like a Mr. 3000 and came back for a day, something like that.
That movie doesn't get referenced enough.
Well, and I'm not a movie guy.
I know,
but
not
I'm
a movie guy at
sports
all. And I want you to know the elite company you're in right now because John's only played that game one other time. Really? It was last year with David Wright.
I beat David Wright in trivia about David Wright head to head.
I can believe that.
Yeah, well,
that does not shock me one bit.
I don't know if I take that as a compliment or a slight.
I think he was busy getting it done, and then you were observing him getting it done, and he was just like executing, and you were remembering. It's a different.
No, look, I have all the respect for anyone that's put on a jersey for a single day in the big league. Something that I stopped putting on a jersey at the age of like 15. So. You know, that's why we have all these questions for you.
On the topic of David Wright, obviously number retirement this year. 2 guys grew up as Mets fans. It's a day we're really looking forward to. Is that a kind of day that you make a point to show every guy in the system right now, remind them, not that they need to be reminded, but show them this is always the goal, right? Like you want to go down as a player that is remembered in this way.
Yeah, that's the pinnacle. And having been around him as a peripheral piece in AAA in the big leagues at that point in time, he treated me great. He treated me with class. He was unbelievable human to me. And that goes along with being like an absolutely elite player and having that jersey retirement is well earned. And we will definitely draw attention to guys like him in those moments. And I think that's just like, here's your example. Here's what we're trying to chase down.
David was a lifelong Met. Not too long ago, you guys added a lot of talent to the system during the international free agency that opened on January 15th. Of course, the class was headlined by Elian Pena. I want you to talk about Elian, but also explain the importance of this date and this period and how it's a vehicle for the organization to add talent that will one day make a big impact in Queens.
Yeah, I think oftentimes we don't pay attention to what happens with 15 and 16-year-olds for very good reason, but that is effectively like the group of players that in early January gets added to the organization. And this year, Elian Pena headed it up, and our international group worked incredibly hard to bring him into the mix. I spent some time in the DR right before coming over here. It's a professional approach from a young kid. He really barrels the ball pretty easily, and there is a large gap between 16, 17 years old to putting on a uniform in Queens, but all you got to do is look at Jose Budo, Dednel Nunez, Francisco Alvarez to realize how important that actually it is to have that continue to funnel into Queens. And it only starts to funnel when your international group grinds like crazy for years to add guys like Ellie into the mix, and then you do what you can from a development pipeline to move them across the board as quickly as possible in a way that helps them be sustained success in Queens.
So, I mean, I have such respect for the work you guys do at the Dominican Academy, and it says a lot about this organization in general, because I think the organization, obviously there's such a focus on player development when it comes to talent-wise with the technology that's used and everything on the field, but I also think the organization does such a great job with off-the-field things like the Dominican Academy, getting people their diplomas, making sure guys are taken care of if the game does not work out for them. And then other aspects, like we were talking to Brandon Sproat, and he said to us, like, I'm working on getting better at doing stuff like sitting here and talking, or going into there and going in the tent, taking all the pictures, because he said they tell you that, like, this is part of the job now, and that, like, you have to get used to this. And I think that those two things together are total opposites, obviously, but they're both such important things that the organization is doing that I don't think a lot of people notice and pay attention to.
It's as special of a day that you will ever see being down there in the DR on graduation day. I went there last year for the first time shortly after I got the job. It's not shocking that Carlos Mendoza showed up too for both of these last 2 years. He's been down there for that day. You're watching kids who worked incredibly hard to get their diploma. And we watched last year a young guy named Miguel Alfonseca, who pitched for us in A-ball last year, get his law degree and then speak to the collective group. And listening to him was like, this guy's not leaving our organization when his playing days are done. And now he's a coach for us this year. His playing days didn't turn into something, but when you see somebody excel that way and his mind work like that and ability to communicate, you're just like, we're keeping these great people in this organization. So there is a help to the Mets, even if it doesn't, like, even if it's done altruistically, like, those people stay with us and become a part of the fabric of our organization. And that day is immensely celebrated down there, and rightfully so. Neskis does an unbelievable job with that group of guys. She runs our international learning for those guys, and she's great. And then at the major league level, what Sproat is walking through, you just got to get comfortable in that space. I don't think anybody, I mean, maybe today with different social media mechanisms, they're more comfortable than we used to be, but you know, like, it's just part of the job. You're going to be talking to people all the time, guys like you. I'm sure Sproat loves it.
Oh, he's, I think, our most frequent guest, actually.
Yeah.
So I feel like he might have meant that sarcastically, but he's joined us more than anyone else. So I hope you do enjoy your time with us, Brandon. Brandon was drafted in the amateur draft. Want to talk a little bit about that. It's a beast. I know it's gotten a little smaller over the years now, just 20 rounds. Used to be 60-plus rounds. Mike Piazza was a 62nd round pick. For fans who might not pay such attention to it, we know the NBA, the NFL draft are kind of more glorified than the MLB draft. How much work internally goes into when you guys finally get in the war room for those 3 days and you're making the selections, adding what you hope is going to be talent that will one day translate to victories in Queens?
Yeah. Chris Gross heads that up for us. It is a impressive operation to watch march through its procedures. Like, Chris is, I come in and I descend on it for 3 days and watch them work. And we offer our PD resources, whether it's Eric Jagers or Jeff Albert or whoever they might want from an assessment perspective to be a part of that mix. But we have an unbelievable scouting team that works incredibly hard. And that's a fun day. Middle of July, I kind of selfishly wish it was early June again to give us a little bit more time in the first season with some of these guys. But it's right during the All-Star break. And every year it's fun to watch those guys get their name called, chase down a lifelong dream, and then all of a sudden they look up when they get here and they're joined with 19, 20 other guys now. We might sign a few non-drafted free agents that didn't get picked. And then the message becomes, like, typically like 3 or 4 of you actually show up in the big leagues and one of you makes like a real career out of this. Like, how do we change those numbers? How do we have a culture that, 7 or 8 of them make real careers out of this in the big leagues? And that's the fun of player development.
Carson Benj obviously was the first pick by the Mets last year. Who are some other guys that, again, I'll ask, maybe fans aren't as focused on from the 2024 class that you will start to hear about as the full season begins here?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to get a lot of those guys out to the A-ball and high A level this year. Eli Serrano, another outfielder with Carson, he put in a lot of really good work. I think I tend to want to praise the work that guys put in. Came in really thin and knew he needed to get stronger, and like 15, 20 pounds later, he's showing up at camp. A lot of credit to him. On the pitching side, we just saw Brendan Gurton, who, he changed his body by working like crazy. So I'm going to draw attention to guys I think do the things that are really praiseworthy. And like, obviously we're excited about Carson. We got Trey Snyder, who is a young guy out of high school, but the work ethic is really impressive. Jonathan Santucci, obviously out of Duke. We're excited to see him get going. He was dealing with a little bit of an injury after the draft, nothing major. And now he's like full go. And so like he's going to start his pro career this year. So it's a long list of guys deeper down. There's some pitching prospects we're really excited about seeing them start their career.
You mentioned Eli. We know that Ryan Clifford and Eli are friends, both from North Carolina, the Carolina area. Vito and I have seen a great friendship bud between Drew Gilbert and Jett Williams. How rewarding is it for you, and how important is it to let these guys, I don't want to say self-police, but make those connections and then help each other along the way, whether it's a guy who's been in the system for a couple years helping a guy who just got into the system, or guys that play together and win together in the minor leagues. We loved the 2023 Rumble Ponies team that made the postseason. They were so much fun to watch, and we always talked about how they were growing together, and one day, not to over-exaggerate, but there could be a little documentary made about the very beginnings that people didn't talk about when they were in Double-A, and hopefully one day they're going down the Canyon of Heroes in Queens. How important is all of that from your perspective?
I think the most powerful thing is you have ownership over a concept when you can teach or share that concept. Creating opportunities to impact other people, like it impacts the teacher as much as the student. So when you get that big brother approach to a new draft pick and you're telling them what they need to do, as you say those things are becoming affirmed in you at a higher level. You're taking a greater degree of ownership. Like the first thing you do as a learner is you listen to somebody tell you or show you what to do, you try to execute it, and then you want to graduate to a point where you can share it affirmatively with somebody else. So those dynamics, they strengthen both sides really powerfully, and they create a great cultural environment. So it's on us in PD sometimes to shut up and let the players talk. It's really powerful when you create opportunities and environments where they get to take ownership of things. And that's kind of the player policed environment you're talking about. Why does Francisco Lindor have such mastery over so much? Because he shares it so freely and he works so hard. And when that is your example at the major league level, when he shows up to start his day in spring training and he's moving through it with a smile, but he is moving through it with purpose for 6 hours in a given day. Ryan Clifford watching that helps him pass that to Eli Serrano as he gets to see that, and Jett Williams seeing that, and Drew Gilbert seeing that. It solidifies in them like, I'm still learning while I'm passing on, and if we can do that again and again at a level better than other organizations, we'll get more big league players than other organizations.
I feel like we've seen the evolution of the common baseball fan over the last few years in a pretty crazy way. When you think about the fact that we went from a place where fans knew their team, then we knew fans started knowing every team in baseball. Then we get to a level where fans start knowing their team's minor league system to the entire minor league system. And now we're at this point where if the Mets hire somebody for personnel, fans are tuned in and have an opinion. Like I remember when Eric Yeagers was hired by the team, fans were like knowledgeable about him and were like, oh, I know exactly who he is. I know about Driveline. I know exactly where he's coming from. How interesting is it for you to see it get to this point where we're deep into the weeds with fans knowing what's going on?
It's impressive. I mean, there's so much data out there. Credit to you guys for spreading the prospect conversation. In this offseason, we grabbed Tucker Frawley. We grabbed him from the Minnesota Twins and made him our director of defense, base running, and gameplay. Coached at Yale for 13 seasons, 5 seasons in the Twins. It was hard for him to leave an organization that was really good to him. He lives in Connecticut. We had a lot of things working in our favor. His dad's a Mets fan. So we were able to bring him over. I think I've gotten more praise for that hire than anything I've done since I've been here, to your point of like awareness of what people can do in certain spaces. And you need elite instructors and you need people that help players understand what they need to get better at. And the best do that really, really well. And they do it in a way that still makes you feel 10 feet tall while you're working at your weakness. And like, it's not as easy to find those guys as you might think. They're pretty special when you find them. And then we create that same dynamic on the player side where our next group of coaches is like, oh, that's what it looks like. And they mirror it, model it, and then they end up doing it. So it's fun sharpening one another that way.
All right, we're going to ask you to put your evaluation hat on one last time here. I want you to rank us as you would a prospect. So, 40, 60, 80 grade, this and that. The quality of the questions here on Meet at the Apple in this interview.
I mean, it seems like I have to give you a respectable grade.
You can do whatever you want,
You can
Andy.
be honest. It's like you said, like when Vientos went down, he was fired up, he got angry, and he worked even harder.
I love it. I love it. I'll give you guys a 60. You fell down a little bit, though, when you asked questions about, like, my playing career. Like, nobody wants any part of that whatsoever.
I wanted to do that. All right, the energy on the show.
Oh, it's there. You guys got that. You bring that.
Okay. What about just the amount of fun you had doing this?
Now, this is where we go below 50.
Oof.
I would love spending my days with our guys back there getting better. I got a lot of reps at this in different roles. You guys are a fun conversation. I want to go back there and grind with our group.
I feel like that's the perfect time to get him out of here then.
We appreciate your time, Andy. Thank you so much. You can follow this podcast, Apple or Spotify, Meet at the Apple. I'm on Twitter at Vito F. Khaleesi, John at JMB9191. Andy, thank you so much for your time today.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys.